All right. Looks like we're good to go. So we are on a brand new topic, and I have some sheets here for you to look at. Of course, our theme is all about creation versus evolution, and that's a big topic. And we want to look today at something called the fossil record. Now, I know this is not science class, but it does deal with the world that God has put us in, and it deals with issues of what we call worldview. And so we want to talk about those things from a biblical perspective. And we don't want to be mean or nasty to people that disagree with us, of course. But let me hand these papers out here first. Let's see. The title is called "Turn the Binoculars Around." We'll talk about that in a jiffy. But let me get started here with a quick photo slide. We've got some photos here, and I wanted to share this with y'all. So you've heard of the ape demand theory. Now, I want to clarify something. This is one of those pet peeves about creation evolution discussions that I don't think is very clear from these notes even. Evolution does not teach that we directly came from apes themselves. It is actually what they call a common ancestor of the ape. We're sort of like a side shoot, if you will. So that's one of those things, because if a person who really does study evolution hears that, like, we didn't come from a monkey. Well, they're like, yeah, we obviously, they would agree. Yeah, we don't come from a monkey. They believe in a common ancestor. So I think it's important to know that. That doesn't really help that doesn't really help like a biblical account of it all or anything like that. But I want to certainly make sure that we have our terms right, that we don't assume that's the thing about making discussions with people, is that if you don't understand their point of view, then they really aren't going to buy into what you have to say. Like, if somebody completely just messes up what I believe about Christianity, or let's say that you feel that way, like somebody says, you just believe in a sky fairy, basically. Well, you're like, okay. Or, you have that sort of eye roll feeling there, like, that is not what we believe. And so we don't want to do the reverse problem. And so that's why we want to understand, when it comes to the issues of creation and evolution, the ape to man theory is really this idea of a common ancestor. And one of them goes into the ape and the other types of primates, right? And then the theory of evolution teaches that branched off into humans. Now, the creation account from Scripture teaches that man actually came from, do you know where man came from? The dirt. The dirt of the ground. The word Adam, the name Adam actually means dirt. It's the same word for dirt. Like Adam or man, it means dirt man, basically. So Adam or Adam just means dirt. And so that's what man came from. Did not come. Well, woman, let's not go too far, because it says that woman came from man. So anyways, I will not go down that rabbit hole, and that's Pandora's box. But anyways, whatever the case, we have some important things to cover here today. I don't know when my clicker thingy is not clicking. Oh, you know what? For some reason that one doesn't work there. Let me bump it down to this guy. There you go. This might work now. So, or not. Maybe it's the battery. Let me exit here. Hold on. Let me, no. There we go. Okay, so this is sort of the idea of what is kind of common. You've seen sort of jokes off of this as well, that there was originally a primate, an ape like creature, and a man slowly evolved from this original ape-like creature. And there's all kinds of different terminologies and everything like that. What's that? Yeah. That creature there, yeah. So it's you see this everywhere. You do. We see this in common culture all the time. And the way that the Bible describes it is, if you were to basically cut off the four behind us, even this guy right here doesn't look all that different than some of us these days. But whatever the case, if you were to slice off the modern man, that's where the Bible starts. It starts with man created from the dust of the ground, God breathed into man the nostrils, into his nostrils, the breath of life. So man became a living creature, a living soul. And then Eve was taken from the rib of the man and created, formed and fashioned by God supernaturally. And those are things that you can't actually, in other words, that can't be done by evolution. That's something that is done by a working of God. And so there's a lot of other issues you can deal with as well. But this is right, the assumed theory, as you hear a lot of things on media and stuff like that. Now, this is kind of a funny thing. So as you have like these ape-like creatures kind of morphing into the sort of hunter-gatherers with a sword and stuff like that, and then spears even, and then the irony is that they de-evolve again back into modern America. It's a joke, right? It's to show you that, but there's a point to this, that some of our practices today might not be the healthiest practices. That's a side note, but this is sort of a joke. But we see these kind of things, like you may have seen another evolution joke where it turns into a robot at the end. Whatever the case, isn't that fun? Now, if you are fans of Jurassic Park, some people didn't like how in Jurassic Park the velociraptors didn't have feathers and these other things, because the assumption is that that's basically you have an ancestry of the chicken going back to dinosaurs and other things like that, according to some of these theories. There are chickens.
But it's like, when you say modern day, it's just like they're all dead.
Now, this is obviously a joke right here. But whatever the case.
It's better without feathers.
The what?
Blue.
The dinosaur.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was missing that one. So anyways, yeah, so whatever the case, you've heard all these different things that are thrown around. Now, when I was young, we loved watching Land Before Time. But think about the title for a second. Land Before Time.
Oh.
What is that assuming? It's assuming that there was what they call, in fact, if you've heard this term, prehistoric. What does that mean?
Isn't that what dinosaurs are?
That's that's the assumption is. If you take the biblical account, we see that there are 6 days of creation. You see that man's created on the 6th day. There really isn't much prehistoric Earth other than those first few days of creation. And so it's one of those things. Now, again, we can't beat anybody all over the heads and trying to be like, you must believe this, but we should try to have a good understanding of what we personally believe. I don't want you to try to convince somebody else to believe something that you don't believe yourself. So we want to have a good handle on these things first. So, so that is, this is a picture of what we call macroevolution. So what we have here is kind of another funny one. Are you guys into diet trends, the paleo diet? Now, I admit paleo diets are pretty good because they have like meat and stuff. I'm all for that. Paleo diet. Have you ever heard of paleo diets? Have you ever heard of that? No? Okay, you've heard of it. Paleo diet is a lot of meat, a lot of, it's assumed that the hunter-gatherers would have eaten this type of food supply. Vegetables.
No grain.
Yeah, no grain. In other words, yeah. But the thing but guys, hear me out. So the whole thing behind the paleo diet revolution thing, it's believing the Paleolithic age. It's the idea of going back several thousand years, hundreds of thousands of years, maybe 200,000 years or so. I think it's the term that they're going for. And you are basically consuming what the ancestors of humans would have eaten. That's what the paleo diet is assuming. And the idea is that, turn around, guys, we've messed up. And maybe there is some truth to our modern age not always being the best for all things. I'm okay with that kind of concept. And I'm okay even at looking at certain diets and whatever might be good for you or whatever. I don't follow a specific diet per se, but whatever the case, the paleo diet is actually an evolutionary concept in its like foundations. I'm not saying you can't eat a paleo diet. It might work for you. It might just be that you disagree with sort of the foundations of the paleo diet or whatever. All right. I'm not like dissing you if you like eat like beef jerky and like raisins. All right. Like that's like or just like you just eat like a steak for 3 meals a day. Okay. If that's your thing, I'm not going to bother you on that, but those are some things there. And here is of course that picture again of the man theory. So we want to understand, what does scripture go with on these type of things? Because sometimes we look at our world today and we're like, look, we've moved from living in caves, the cavemen, right? You remember the cavemen commercial from Geico? They were kind of funny, but it's the idea you've gone from being a caveman to living in a skyscraper, which are pretty remarkable, right? That we have these huge things. We've tamed the wilderness to build, and built cities and all these other things. We have the iPhones and the Androids and all kinds of things that can do very, very powerfwant things. Like, it's impressive. It really is. But, and so we want to see, we want to look back at a biblical view of history, if you will. And we also want to see specifically about what the fossil records have to say about life and history. How does the Bible kind of work in coordination with that? How do we understand these things? So it's the theme here of turning the binoculars around. So what do binoculars do? But what do they specifically do? Yeah, they help you to see things far away in a more emphasized manner. So what happens if you turn your binoculars around? Do you see that which is far away in a clear way anymore? No, you just see like little itty bitty bugs out there, instead of seeing them up close through your lens that you're using. And a lot of times people do that when it comes to worldview. The things that they already believe about themselves and about this world, they are filters. You have them. I promise you have a worldview. You do. If you say, I don't have a worldview, then that means you have a worldview of believing that you don't have a worldview, which is ironic because it is a worldview, because you then assume you are basically a buffet of beliefs. You just take whatever you feel like, and you're like, well, I don't have a worldview. Or really, do you think murder is wrong? Where do you get those ideas from? Do you believe it's right to give to charity? All these different questions you can go into.
You're saying you don't have any glasses on when you have all the glasses on.
Yeah. That's basically the idea, or at least a type of glass. Yeah, glasses. Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe we'll clear things up. But the idea is that everybody wears, if you will, certain kinds of lenses to see the world. And the way that the glasses that you put on are beliefs that you already adopted. If you believe the Bible is true, those are a set of glasses that you're putting on. If you do not believe the Bible is true, those are also glasses that you're putting on, because now you look at the biblical account here, just the pages of scripture. You look at different things in the world, geology, for example, the structures of the world, like the Grand Canyon and other things, and you have beliefs about them. There's no escaping. There's no such thing as a neutral worldview. A lot of times I think people think that. They're like, oh no, I'm just open-minded. Did you know open-mindedness is a worldview? So it's one of those things to think through. So everybody, as we'll see here, has the same evidence. The question we want to ask people today is, hey, what evidence supports your view? How Darwinian evolution fails to account for the evidence? And really, everybody uses evidence. And so we're going to see that. We'll see some more things next week. Same evidence, different worldview, right? So same evidence, different worldview. So when it comes to the monkey to man thing, do you believe this or not? You don't have to say that out loud, but the idea is, do you think that man came from a common ancestor of an ape? And if you do, that is a worldview that you've already placed on your face, basically, on your eye, over your eyes. If you say, no, I believe that man is created from the dust of the ground supernaturally by God, then that's a different worldview. And you just have to be honest with what you believe. And maybe you haven't really figured out what you believe yet, which again, I'm not trying to coerce you to make decisions right now at this very second, but I really think you ought to think about it at this stage of your life, because that affects the rest of your life. And so we have, this thing right here. A good question you can just simply ask about somebody who holds to this is, so what evidence supports your view? What evidence supports your view? Because, in 1 Peter 3, it actually says this. Let me see, I think it's right here. In your hearts, regard Christ, the Lord, as holy, ready at any time to give a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Let me pause there. Most people just read that verse and they're like, yeah, apologetics. I'm going to do a Incredible Hulk, smash the competition. Because there are some people who are defending the Christian faith that are just mean. I mean, I've seen some really good apologists that are like great at like just completely blowing apart their person that they're debating, but they're mean as anything. And so the second half says this, yet, that's kind of an important word. Do this with gentleness and reverence. So when you're, again, I'm not trying to say go out into your schools, into your friends, into the movie theater, stand up and shout at when you're watching the new Ice Age, if it comes out. I don't know if there's one that comes out, but let's say it does, and it teaches an evolutionary concept. I'm not saying that you should go around the entire movie theater and be like, this is blasphemy. Like, I don't know that that's going to help. It doesn't seem to be doing so with gentleness and reverence. If a friend asks you, so what do you think about that? Because you're a Christian and everything, then you can have, again, gentleness and respect and reverence towards those people. And so that's very important to not just have good answers, but to have a good spirit. And usually Christians are like one or both. They're like, bless your heart, son, sonny rather. And they have no answer. They're very nice. And then on the other reverse, the other guy is just like, so let me take you on to an intellectual discourse. And they just completely pound their opponent. And they're like, so are you stupid? You still believe that? I'm like, that's not helpful. That's not good. That's not good evangelistic work, if you will. So we want to have both. So maybe, man. I like them. Like, I'm not trying to say you can't watch them. I just know when I'm watching a show, it's actually better to think that way. Like, you're assuming that you're going to get fed stuff that might not be biblical. It's almost better, even on Christian movies, by the way. Mic drop. Sorry. We recorded that, didn't we? Everybody uses the same evidence, though, right? We all do. We all use the same evidence, but we look at it differently. Artifacts, documents, testimony, or history that can be used to support whether or not a belief is true. We all use the same evidence. In fact, atheists use the Bible as evidence. But the problem is for them, in my opinion, right, as we look at it from Christians, is the way they look at this piece of evidence is they think this is mythology, that it is basically fairy tales and stuff like that. Christians believe that this is the inspired word of God. And so we have the same evidence that we can use, but we look at it differently. And so that's where we really have to get to the hearts of people when we talk about these things. So all the same evidence, but we interpret it differently through a worldview, which we've already been talking about. That's the view of the world, the framework that you use to interpret the world, right? So if you were to ask this question to somebody, how old's the Grand Canyon?
Very old.
It's old, but that's a very relative term. That's like, saying that I'm old when I'm 30. I'm old compared to Carson, but I'm not really old compared to most adults, and I'm going to continue to tell myself that. But anyways. Paul Bunyan.
It was formed when Noah's Ark, whatever, the water, and yeah.
How do you know?
How do I know? Because you can tell by the layers. I learned this in science class. That's the one thing.
Oh, you see, Aaron. See, a person who is a science, who holds to more of an old evolutionary science or an old Earth view of the world, right, would say, oh, Aaron. They would hold to the idea that these are geological layers formed over millions of years. And that's you've gone to the Natural Bridge before, up in Natural Bridge, Virginia? No.
They use you can see the layers, which means it formed quickly.
Well,
On the side of the mountain.
Yeah. Again, so here's the thing. What we're dealing with here is we have the exact same evidence as somebody who is an evolutionist, an old Earth creationist even. And so we have the same evidence. The question remains then, how do you interpret it, right? And again, if you believe that there was a worldwide global flood that God sent on this world that cataclysmically changed and shaped the world as we know it today, then that is a big thing of glasses that you're wearing. On the other end, if you believe that the world is formed over billions of years and these new formations are in the last several millions of years, guess what? Those glasses are really big as well that you're putting on. So the question is, which glasses are you wearing, basically? So that is it. And the question you would have to ask somebody as you get into a conversation is, so what evidence supports your view for that? And you should ask that Christians too, right? What evidence supports your view for that? You've shared some things there. but you can ask that to somebody who holds to the theory of evolution. You have fossils, any remains, impression, or trace of living thing of a former geologic age, like a skeleton, a footprint, yada, yada, yada. And so I don't think we'll have time for this little clip here. It's the same kind of things that we've been going through. I'm sorry there, Mike. But there are what we call missing links. This is a really big thing. As you talk with people from a Darwinian perspective, and you ask them, so do we have all these links in a row that Darwin was assuming? And as a lot of people have studied, in fact, even some people who aren't even Christians have had a lot of doubts about Darwin's theory. There's a guy named Michael Behe. There's a lot of other people who are into creation, into what's called intelligent design. And there's something called Darwin's doubt, Darwin's black box. There's a lot of criticisms of Darwin as of late. So, as Aaron was saying, the flood explains the fossil record. That's our evidence. That's our perspective from a creationistic perspective. But the thing here, and this is just a couple of charts. This is showing you what the theory of evolution was supposed to be, according to Darwin, is that you have basically one common ancestor, if you will, one common element that you're kind of going back this sort of like, we call it like a prebiotic soup kind of thing. And the very, very, very basic organism, right? And it evolves slowly into more complex organisms, right? Which evolve into other more complex organisms like a T-Rex, into more complex organisms like lobster, but whatever the case. The idea is that it would be slow change, gradual change over time. But here's the problem. The fossil record doesn't say that. What you should see in a fossil record is basically like one central thing, and then it sort of widens out to more complex, more complex, more complex. But actually, here's, I don't know if you've ever heard this term, and I'm sure that Elena, your mom, who teaches science, right? She's a big science fan and whiz. She, I'm sure, has probably heard of this. It's called the Cambrian explosion. What is that? I've heard of Cambrian explosion. So the Cambrian explosion is really fascinating. There's something called the Precambrian layers of geology, which is hardly any organisms down there fossil-wise. And then there's the Cambrian layer, which is right above it. And the Cambrian layer has an explosion of life. And this is a really big problem. So that's why they call it the Cambrian explosion, because if it was gradual, it shouldn't be that way. It should be simple, more complex, kind of widening out like a big V. That's not how it happens. It's virtually nothing and then explosion. And really, I don't think the evolutionary framework works there. What does work much better is this idea that there was one instantaneous explosion of life. And that's what the Bible records. So if you're interested in the Cambrian explosion, that's a really fascinating topic. There's some great books out there. And then on the flip side, though, the creationist perspective holds to that the flood explains the fossil record. So Genesis 6 and 7, it talks about how the waters of the world, of the earth, had gone up even to above to the highest mountains, and it's flooding the whole earth. It wasn't just like, modern day Iraq. It was like the whole earth and reaching to the heavens. And a lot of people would say, when they hear about the flood, right, people mock the Creation Museum, right? If you were to tell some of your science teachers out there, or friends even, that you went to the Creation Museum, they would think that you have lost your brain. They think like, that's stupid, that's mythology, that's just fairy tales. They really would. I'm not trying to be mean towards them, but these are the comments that you would get from quite a few people. Some people would be like, well, that's cool. A lot of people in the more of the Gen Z bracket are like, well, you do you, man. They're a little bit more in that way. The millennials, my crew, there's like, you're dumb. But whatever the case, they're a little bit more judgmental. But the idea is that most people, when they hear about the flood and the Creation Museum stuff, right, you hear from Answers in Genesis, you're not going to be popular for it. You aren't, right? When I was in graduate school, the professor there, the philosophy professor, I watched one of his videos. I wasn't in the philosophy department. I was in history. I watched one of his philosophy videos, and he basically mocked Christianity like just outright. And so now I had a great experience, by the way, at that school. But so I'm not trying to say you can't thrive in a secular school environment. But the idea is that they really mocked Christians that believe in creationism. And there were some things that I never had a chance to share because I was watching a video. But the thing is that, again, if you were to ask a professor or high school teacher or friend or adult, they confront you with the thing about the flood or other issues, what would be a question that you could ask them in a nice way, not in like in a snarky way? If they were to say like, I believe we came from, I believe in theory of evolution. So they might say that. What would you say? Like, what would you respond with? What do you think, Elena?
If they asked, if they said they believed in a theory of evolution.
Yeah.
It probably go the route in which things that science can explain, like the moral argument.
Oh, okay. There certainly is that. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. And there's a lot of good comments that you can make. What I would encourage you guys as well, and this is something that I learned over time that I was really bad at, like when I was in my 20s, I would always just state an answer, is asking questions in return as well. That can be really helpful because a lot of times people don't think about, Jesus did this a lot. He always, when people asked him questions, he would ask them a question. So which one of you is, able to cast the stone first, right? He would often ask questions. And that's really, really helpful because you're not confronting them, right? If you're just saying, well, this, and this, and there was a space for that, but I would encourage you guys to ask in response to them. So what do you mean by evolution? Because you might even ask them like, what exactly about evolution do you believe in? Because again, we talked about microevolution, the idea that there are small changes within species. And I'd be like, sure, we all see that there, but what about from species to species or other issues, right? Because I think those are helpful and healthy for conversations. We don't want to be jerks, and especially from younger generations, we really don't want to be jerks. Like judgmentalism is like the biggest like sin in America from people under the age of 25, basically. If you just would be willing to ask questions to them and just be like, and generally be curious. Don't be like, so what do you mean?
Say under or over
Under 25?
judgmentalism?
In some ways.
Yeah, I'd say it's older than that because there's
Yeah, okay, maybe 35. Yeah.
Any millennial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because our generation's like.
That's fair.
Electronics.
Yeah, that's fair. And so that's an interesting way that we're kind of living in, is a lot of people are they might not even mock you in this day and age for the younger generation crowd for believing in a flood and creation, because they're like, hey, if that works for you, then you do you. Like if it works for you, it's not like, is it true, but if it works for you. But I think if you were to go with that too, like, so let me ask you this, is the way that you live your life, does that work for you? Like not in like a mean way, like you're living in sin, like, but is your life actually working for you? It's really helpful to do that. So anyways, a lot of good stuff for us to think through, guys. Was that good? Was that helpful? Think about ways this week that you can ask questions in return to people who might have a different worldview from you. All right. I think that'll be good for us and a good, healthy outreach. All right. Thank you all.